Parsha 101, Parshas Yisro. So, very exciting Torah portion because this is the Torah portion of the Ten Commandments. However, what it starts with, kind of in the name, is Vayishma Yisro Kohen Midian, Chosin Moshe, etc., 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 all that God did for the Jewish people. That Yisro, a priest of Midian, the father-in-law of Moshe, heard all that God did for the Jewish people, all the miracles, etc. Now, it said about Yisro, who is the father of Tzipporah, the wife of Moshe, that he was someone who had practiced all the idolatries in the world and also rejected all of them, which is goes back to the whole thing when Moshe met Tzipporah at the well, and the shepherds were kind of harassing the daughters of Yisro because how could your father have rejected everything? They ostracized them, etc., etc. But Yisro tried it all, and now that is part of why he is considered like the model convert, because we know that he tried all the other religions and he rejected all of them, and he is now choosing Judaism. So he is not coming with Tzipporah and Moshe's two sons, Gershom and Eliezer, whom he had sent back when he came to Egypt. When he finally went back to Egypt after the burning bush, Aaron said, "Why are you bringing them here? We already have enough slaves. Send them back." He sent them back home. Now Yisro, now that the Jews have been freed and the great miracles have happened, and everyone's talking about what's going on, Yisro is now bringing Moshe's wife and sons to meet them. They're in Mount Sinai. They're in the Sinai desert. They're at Mount Sinai. They're ready to receive the Torah. So he comes and he sends a message into the clouds of like, "Hey, I'm here." And so Moshe's going to go out to greet him. Aaron and his sons sees Moshe's going out. Who's he going out to? They're also going, and all the people are like, "Hey, who are they? It must be somebody important if all the big guys are going out to greet him." So all the people went out to greet Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law. And Yisro makes this proclamation of, "Now I know that God is the ultimate. Now I know He's greater than any other, smaller deity that exists. He is God. He is it." Now, what happens next in the Parsha, in this Torah portion, is that it sort of skips to a part that really occurs after the giving of the Ten Commandments, because Yisro is going to be there for the giving of the Ten Commandments, and then this whole section is going to happen, and then he's going to go home to convert the rest of his family to Judaism. So until now, we've had people who have come, Avram preached about God, forefathers were spreading the word, and people had accepted monotheism upon themselves. But at this point, we're talking about the Jewish people becoming a nation, like an official nation, which is why Yisro is kind of considered the first convert into that, and becoming like I am now a Jewish person. Well, they called it a Hebrew. I'm now of the Hebrew people, who is not specifically a Jacobson, to specify that. Now, so this part that comes next it skips ahead, kind of. And this is actually not unusual with the Torah. There are times that the Torah does not follow an exact chronological order, and that's because it doesn't have to. So, there's explanations for it, but the basic is that it doesn't have to. Usually it does. So here, what's the part that it skips to is that after the Torah is given, Moshe now sits to judge the people. And part of this is that, people have questions, they've got cases, what do we do here? And they came to ask Moshe, and Moshe kind of took this, turned it into kind of like a learning opportunity. As they're going to come, and I'm going to instruct them in different things. And Yisro sees what's going on, and he's seeing that Moshe's sitting there, and the people are waiting on him all day. It says that Moshe sat all day and was judging the people. Now, it wasn't exactly all day that Moshe was judging the people. It was really for, part of the day or kind of most of the day. But because it was honestly and correctly and all that sort of stuff, it was considered as if it was done the whole day. And this is also something that in general, when a judge is honest and righteous in what they're doing, then God considers as if it was the whole day that he did this, right? It extends throughout the day. So Yisro sees what's going on, and he tells Moshe, this way you're doing is not right. How can you have the people just standing and waiting on you? You're not keen, you can't, what's going on here? It's not right you're going to get worn out, and it's not right for the people either. So Moshe kind of explains what his objective is, and Yisro's like, we gotta get a system here. If God agrees with this, then you got to set up kind of like a tier system. You got to find yourself well-established men. You have to what they call like anshe chayil, they call it, and you have to find God-fearing men, and anshe emes, which you say kind of like in men with integrity. So any bets that men who hate money, as in like not anyone who like, oh, I got a $3 million loan hanging over this guy, and also someone who's going to reject obviously then bribery, right? And you're going to make these people, you're going to create this tier system. You're going to have leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of 50s, and 10s. So even if we just look at the count that we have, that there's 600,000 males between the ages of 20 and 60. Now we know when the Jewish people were counted, those are numbers that are counted. That would mean that the leaders of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens means that we've got 600 leaders of thousands, 6,000 leaders of hundreds, 12,000 leaders of fifties, and 60,000 leaders of tens, right? So basically, the smaller the case, the more minor the situation, these men could take care of it, and if they can't take care of it, then they'll push it up the ranks until only the major cases will come before you, and especially if you have to go, speak directly to God about it. So we got to make a ranking system, and these men can also teach, is kind of what Yisro is saying, like let each people do this on their level. So you'll take well-respected men within the community, and they'll be the ones to do this. But we sort of have this today even. There's a side point, like, there are rabbis of communities, and they're what we call like a rav, and you have the great rabbanim, and you have people who answer halachic questions. There is kind of this ranking system that sort of exists, even if it's kind of unofficial. But that's a common thing. You have the people who could be, the people on the street and answer regular questions. They're not. They go to someone who's more knowledgeable or more expert in a certain area, and that's how it goes. So Yisro kind of implemented this, and commentaries kind of point out that the name Yisro is kind of from the word like yeser, which is more, like that he added. It says, because God added this section to the Torah because of Yisro, as in, all this is a credit to Yisro. That's part of also why the Torah portion is named for him, because he added, quote unquote, he added this section to the Torah. So this is one of the reasons why it's named for him. Now, everybody agreed. Moshe, God said, that was a good idea and make it happen. Moshe tells the Jewish people, okay, guys, new plan. We're going to have this tier system. They agreed a little bit too readily to this. And the commentaries kind of say, the fact that they agreed too readily is kind of because they thought, oh, good. Like, if we have men who are not exactly Moses, not exactly like Moshe, then we can, maybe we can get the courts to work more in our favor. And there's different descriptions of how the Jewish people, like, right before a court case would be decided, they'd be like, oh, wait, I forgot, I have a new witness. Oh, I forgot, I have more evidence to bring forth. Or, they're a tough crowd to deal with. Anyways, it took about 6-7 months to implement this plan. Then after that point, Yisro went home to convert his family. So all this is told here, even though it didn't necessarily happen yet in chronological order. Now we have that so now the Torah now shifts to the giving of the 10 Commandments on our Sinai, and tells us in the third month of the redemption. So the redemption happened in Nisan. The next Hebrew month is Iyar, and the next month after that is Sivan. So Sivan is the month of the giving of the Torah. It says they reached Midbar Sinai, but they were in a place called Rephidim, and they went to Midbar Sinai. So they're sort of within the vicinity of the Sinai desert, but now they're actually reaching Mount Sinai at this point. Now there's a lot of commentary about why a desert, why a mountain, and so many different things. So just to give something just really quick of an idea, why was the Torah given in a desert? So we say a desert there's no owner to a desert, right? Nobody owns it. The same way that the Torah is for everyone. It's not the province of one specific person. The desert represents humility because it's kind of like a lowly place, right? It's a sense of lowliness. The desert. The Jewish people entering the desert, they had to abandon all outside worries and have complete trust in God, which is kind of the way we approach Torah and Judaism, of a complete trust in God and abandon worries, and we don't have to worry about other things because all of our faith and trust is in God. Different things like that. Interesting commentary about why a mountain. There's a lot of different things about it, but one of them we think about what's a mountain is made out of dirt, right? And dirt is considered the lowliest of the 4 elements. You have fire, air, water, earth, told in that order is in the level of the refinement and the spirituality of the elements. Earth is considered the lowest of it. And what's a mountain? A mountain is a massive pile of dirt. So even something that's so lowly, which is earth and dirt, can be raised up so high, right? And that's kind of the lesson also that's being portrayed and given over in the giving of the Torah, that us physical beings, we can raise ourselves to high spiritual heights through Torah and connecting to God. Now the Torah tells us in the verse that the Jewish people camped at the mountain. It said Ki'ish Achad B'Lev Echad. Well, it says Vayichan Sham Yisrael. Vayichan Sham Yisrael. The Jewish people camped there. Vayichan is, if you're familiar with Hebrew, that's a singular tense. It's a singular usage instead of Vayachanu, whatever, which would be a plural. So Rashi, foremost commentator of the Torah, says Ki'ish Achad B'Lev Echad. like one man with one heart. That's why it's considered in the singular. Now, he also points out that this was very unique to this camping. Because he said all the other times that they made camp, there were fights breaking out, there was trouble brewing, but here they came in there was absolute peace and unity before the giving of the Torah. Now, they camped on the east side of the mountain, and there was a cloud that was covering the top of the mountain. It's actually interesting. This is going to be part of this. We don't know today where Mount Sinai is. When you go to Israel and you take some tours of the Sinai Desert, the point, like, oh, we think it's there, but we don't actually know which mountain is Mount Sinai, which is also part of this whole thing of that the Torah is not limited to one specific place. There's no ownership, not in place and not in person, I guess you could say, of the Torah, because it's for all people, for all time, and all places. So it's just an interesting thing. You think, we know where the Temple Mount is, so it's just interesting. Now, so that's the first day of Sivan. They reach the mountain. Second day of Sivan, Moshe goes up the mountain. Now, if you've worked out before and you think burpees or something or squats are bad, Moshe is about to go up and down the mountain lots of times. So Moshe goes up the mountain, and God tells him, okay, this is what you got to tell. He says, Kosamar leves Yaakov, v'sagid levnei Yisrael. This is what you should say to the house of Jacob and tell to the children of Israel. So commentaries explain, Leves Yaakov is considered the woman, v'sagid levnei Yisrael is considered the men. As in, tell the woman first and then tell the men. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of commentaries on this. Part of it is the way it's given over, the way to tell it to the women versus the way to tell it to the men. A lot of it has to do with the fact that women are on a higher spiritual level, innately are on a higher spiritual level than on men. And that also affects the way the Torah should be told to them. Part of it is that some commentaries relate it to the sin with Adam and Chava and the tree of knowledge, where God told, don't eat from the tree. He told it to Adam, who then told it to Chava. And when he told Adam to Chava, he kind of changed. He added part of it of don't touch the tree either, and that's part of where some of the trouble began. So it's like, so this time we're going to make sure to get it right. We're going to tell the woman first. So it says, now, we're not getting to the whole thing, but there is a whole thing about when Moshe went up the mountain, the angels were like, God, why are you giving them the Torah? The Torah belongs up in heaven. Why do the people get it? And God told Moshe, okay, respond to them. So first commandment is, I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Turns to the angels. Were you ever in Egypt? No. You have parents to honor? No. Whatever. Okay, so Moshe proved the point, and the angels like, okay, he could take the Torah. It says also the angel showered him with gifts at that point, and the angel of death, this is when he told him kind of the secret that the Ketores, which is the incense that's burned in the temple, can be used to fight against plague, which is, we see when there's certain plagues that broke out that Aaron walked among the people. This is going to be coming in the upcoming Torah portions. Aaron walked among the people with this Ketores, and it did help against the plague. Now, then God says, tell the people that, you see what I did to Mitzrayim, see what I did to the Egyptians. So I carried you on eagle's wings, all this kind of stuff. If you follow, what I tell you to do, and you keep my covenant, then you're going to be raised up. You're going to be my nation. You're going to be raised up among them. He also says, "Vatem tiyu li mamlachas kohanim v'gai kadosh." You should be to me mamlachas kohanim, a kingdom of priests, but it's kind of should be like my people, my officiators, my noble people. You should be like a noble people. And the Gai Kadosh, and a holy nation, right? Gai means nation. So Gai Kadosh, a holy nation. There's a lot that's connected to this verse about being a holy nation. That even things that are not specific commandments per se, or certain kind of behaviors that are connected to this idea that we're supposed to be a holy nation. Now, so Moshe goes down, he gathers the elders, tell the people, and the people are like, yeah, we're going to do all that God tells us we're going to do. So the third of Nisan, that'll happen the second Nisan. Third of Nisan, Moshe goes back up the mountain to hey, the people said they're going to do, right? And then God says, okay, tell them, I'm going to speak to you, Moses. I'm going to come like the thick of Anan, in the thickness of the cloud, and they're all going to hear me speak to you, and they're going to believe in you forever. And not just you, right? All the prophets that come after you, they're going to believe in them forever. And so Moshe goes to tell this to the Jewish people, and they're like, no. The way Rashi describes it, we want to see the king. We want to hear directly from God. We don't want any middleman relaying this message. So the fourth of Sivan, Moshe goes back up the mountain to relay the message to God, right? And all this, Moshe's going up and down the mountain, and he's not worried. He's not stopping to take care of his own needs, and it's not just physical needs. Oh, I gotta go grab a sandwich. It's also his own spiritual needs, which you could imagine Moses preparing for the giving of the Torah. It's not a simple thing, and he's not stopping to take care of himself. He's relaying the messages, God to people, people to God, back and forth, which is also just a lesson that when people are in need, and there's a great need among people, it's not a time for us to get all caught up in our own spiritual affairs. Anyway, so the 4th of Nisan, Moshe tells God that, okay, the people want to hear from you, and God says, okay, they're going to have to sanctify themselves, they have to wash their clothes. And Chassidus, the clothes, the garments are thought, speech, and action, right? They're going to have to purify themselves. Their thought, speech, and action, because this is within our province to purify. Otherwise, the rest of this, sanctify them. That's kind of Moshe's job, to kind of boost them up to a level. They're also commanded to separate from their wives, that there should be no marital relations at this point, not until after the giving of the Torah. And then God says, on the 3rd day, I'm going to descend on the mountain. It says that everyone's going to see me, and from this, the commentaries infer that means everyone's going to be healed, right? Because a blind person can see, right? So the blind, the infirm, everybody, the deaf, everyone's going to be healed, because everyone has to have full experience of the giving of the Torah. Also, that the full healing is going to occur. Oh, also that it says that all the souls of every Jewish person that was ever going to be was at the giving of the Torah on Har Sinai. Whoever was ever going to be part of the Jewish people was there and experienced the giving of the Torah in Har Sinai. Hashem also tells Moshe to set up boundaries around the mountain. He tells them, tell the Jewish people not even to touch the edge, or else they're going to have to be stoned. They're going to be put to death for doing that. They're not allowed to come anywhere near it. And only after they hear this long shofar blast, the ram's horn, a long blast, signal the end, the whole ceremony of the giving of the Torah, only then could they come. They'll know that the divine presence has left the mountain, and then they can actually touch the mountain at that point. Goes back to what I said before, because the mountain was no longer a place of divine, where God was specifically, the divine presence was specifically there. It went back to just being a mountain. That's all. It was not specifically this holy mountain anymore. So Moshe relays everything to the Jewish people, and they do as instructed. Okay, now we go to the 6th of Sivan. It's the morning of the 6th of Sivan, and it's time for the giving of the Torah. There's thunder, there's lightning, there's a cloud, the big, thick, heavy clouds coming on the mountain. There's a really strong shofar blast that sounds. The first one, not the second one. The first one that increases in volume and just goes on and on and on and on. And all the people, they tremble. Moshe leads them to the foot of the mountain. The way it's described, sachtasar, it seems that they were standing under the mountain, right, as if God had raised up the mountain, they stood beneath it. Lots of commentary, obviously, lots of commentary here. But they say the whole of Mount Sinai was up in smoke because God descended, not specifically upon it, but God descended to the mountain in this great fire, and the whole mountain was quaking. You can imagine this massive situation that was going on. It says all the heavens were opened, and there was a complete revelation of godliness, unlike anything that was or will ever be, as far as this public revelation that God made occurred at the time of the giving of the Torah. It's also very interesting. This is something the Rebbe emphasized and pointed out a lot, that as compared to other religions, where the way their history of the religion goes, or the foundation of the religion, always rests within one person having a divine revelation. Right? That's the way other religions go. The Jewish religion, what is unique to Judaism, is that it's the only religion whose origins are that God revealed himself to millions of people. Because if you have 600,000 people between the age of 20 and 60, and that's men between 20 and 60, we could assume there's many, many more women, plus there's anybody who's younger, men and women, and anyone who's older, men and women. So the minimum you get to is 1.2, 2 million. There were millions of people there. And God publicly revealed himself to all of them, and everyone walked away with the same account. There are no differing accounts of what occurred on Mount Sinai. It's the same story that has been told for generations. It's been passed on through the generations. This is something unique, absolutely unique to the Jewish people, and something that we should be proud of. This divine revelation that lays at the foundation of who we are as a people. So this occurs, and now there's also a thing that before Hashem gave the Torah, he said, wants a guarantor, and the people said, oh, the parents will be the guarantors, the prophets will be the guarantors, as in, our parents will take care of things, and the elders and all that sort of stuff. And Hashem said, no, 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 no. Finally said, our children would be the guarantors. And God said yes to that. So it was when the people promised that they were going to keep teaching the Torah throughout the generations, and the children were going to uphold it, right? And inspire their parents to uphold it. They remind them that they're supposed to uphold it. That is when that is what God agreed to give the Torah on. Now, God tells Moshe, he sends Moshe, said, remind the people they got to stay back. They're not allowed to touch the mountain. And what occurs now is you have Moshe is able to go all the way up to the top of the mountain. Aaron could go up part of the way. The Kohanim, who at that point were still kind of the firstborns, got to go up some of the mountain, and the rest of the people were surrounding the mountain. They had to be back from the mountain. And in this moment of the giving of the Torah in Har Sinai, there's a change that occurs in the world in that spirituality is now able to infuse physicality. In the sense that before that, if there was, let's say, a Torah scroll, it did not retain holiness. Something that was used for mitzvah did not retain holiness. The spiritual, what occurred at the moment of doing the mitzvah, which they had mitzvah, they had Torah study, it didn't remain afterward. It occurred in the moment, and then, and then the physical thing reverted back to only being physical. At that moment, this fusion that occurs between spirituality and physicality, of heaven coming down to earth and all this sort of stuff, the change that occurs in the world means that when we take something physical and use it for the spiritual, it can now maintain and retain its spirituality. So now it says Hashem spoke all these words, which is the 10 Commandments. So there's 613 commandments altogether. The 10 Commandments are kind of like a highlight reel. A lot of commentaries explain how you could find all 613 within the 10. The breakdown is that we have 248. We use the word either positive, active, thou shalt do's, and then there's 365, either you could call it passive, prohibitive, thou shalt not do's. That's how it goes. Now it says Hashem first said all of the 10 in one breath, then he went back and said the first 2, and then Moshe said the remaining 8. And even this also, the first 2 encompass the entire Torah. Because the first one is I am God, as in all the positive precepts. And the second one, all the thou shalt do's. And the second one, you should have no other gods before me, are all the prohibitive. Thou shalt not do. Now, it says also that as God said each of the commandments, the Jewish people were like, yes, we're going to do this. Some say for the negative, they were like, yeah, we're going to follow it. And some said, no, we will not do this, depending on what the commentary said. Okay, now we're at the 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments, we know. First one, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, right? Second one, you should have no other gods before me. Also, you should not make a carved image or a likeness of me, right? This is why there's no depictions. In Judaism, there's no depictions of God, and there's also no depictions, it's not really sort of connected, but also say whatever, there's no depictions of all that kind of stuff. There's also, where you should have no other, there shouldn't be any portraits or any imagery that you worship for me. And God says, because in this, I'm a very zealous God, right? And he also says, up to the 3rd and 4th generation, when someone will make these images and bow down to them instead of me, if their children will continue in this vein, then I'm going to bear a grudge for 3 and 4 generations. And now, the punishment continues 3 or 4 generations. Only if the children continue. At the same time, for those who worship me and those, do as I say, etc., my kindness is lost for 2,000 generations, right? So it's a 500-time difference what's occurring here. Okay, so that's the 2nd commandment. 3rd commandment is you should not swear my name, you should not use my name in vain. God will not absolve. He says, I will not absolve those who do so. It's not just a matter of, don't swear by God's name or use it in vain. It's also, there's a lot of you can't swear that a tree is a rock, or you can't swear that a tree is a tree. There's a lot of stuff that goes along with it. The 4th one is remember Shabbos and keep it holy. We have one of the verses there. There's a few verses there, and one of the verses is actually part of Kiddush or Shabbos Day. It comes from there. The other parts of Kiddush or Friday night come from the account of creation of Bereshis. It says 6 days you're going to work. The 7th day is Shabbos to Hashem for your sons, your daughters, your servants, right? Your animals, all the people of your household. There's different levels of Shabbat observance, but Shabbos is going to be observed throughout your household by everyone who's there. 5th one is to honor your parents, and your days will be extended. You're going to have long life if you do so. The first 5 are considered the ones between man and God. And part of that is, even though the next 5, when we see them, you see, oh, these all make sense. Don't murder, don't do this, that, whatever. Why does God have to make a whole ceremony on Mount Sinai for these second 5? So part of it is because these second 5, even if they make sense to us, they're not rooted in logic. they're rooted in the fact that God gave them to us. Because especially when it's only our own logic and sense that dictates these things, we can also rationalize out of them also, right? Or we can be tempted to cut corners maybe. But when it's rooted in the belief in God, then these become absolute for us. So now you say, oh, what are the honoring parents as part of the first 5? Well, because God is part of creation. God is part of the birth and the creation of man and children. So that's how the parents get bumped up kind of to the 5th one. Now the second 5, we have don't murder, no adultery, it says don't steal, but this is explained as no kidnapping. The specific thing about stealing monetarily and possessions comes later. It's considered not to kidnap. Don't bear false witness, and you should not envy your friend, his house, his wife, his servants, his ox, his donkey, anything that he has. You should not envy it. Obviously, there's a lot of commentary on this. Just something very short. They say that when you line up the 10 commandments, the 5 and the 5, opposite each other, they connect to each other, as in the 1st and the 6th, and the 2nd and the 7th, 3rd and the 8th, the 4th and the 9th, and the 5th and the 10th. So very quickly, for example, the second one, you shall not have any other gods, lines up with the prohibition against adultery, right? Which is going outside of the marriage kind of thing, right? So you shouldn't have anybody else in your life. You shouldn't have anybody else in your life. The commandment to keep Shabbos, right, which God created the world, and on the 7th day he rested. So we work for 6 days and we rest on the 7th day. That lines up with not to bear false witness, because Shabbos is not just about it is the sanctity and the holiness of Shabbos and, a day of rest and all that sort of stuff, but it's also we are bearing witness to creation, to the fact that God created the world and then he rested on the 7th day, right? That's also what's going on with keeping Shabbos. So a bunch of other stuff. So now we wrap up the giving of the Torah. The nations, they saw the thunder and the flames and the sound and all that kind of stuff, and they retreated from fear. Commentaries say, what was seen or heard. A lot of the agreement is that they saw what's usually heard and they heard what's usually seen, because this is part of the great revelation that's going on. At that point also, they asked Moshe to speak. They're like, okay, we got the point, about God speaking to us. We've experienced it, and now from now on, you should be the one to speak with us, because we're going to die if we have to keep going through this with God. It's too much. We can't handle it. Right, and Moshe's trying to tell him, don't be afraid, God's trying to uplift you, but okay, we'll make the switch. Right, God agrees that the switch should be made. Now, after this is when Moshe is going to go up on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights to learn the Torah, get the Torah, to be able to bring down to the Jewish people. God says to Moshe, tell the Jewish people that you saw what happened. You saw how I spoke from the heavens. It says, the text says, you shouldn't have any idols of silver and gold. Don't make of me any of these things. Don't make them for yourself. And Rashi, foremost commentator of the Torah, says it's referring to not making images or depictions of what occurred. Like, you saw a bunch of all the heavenly beings that you saw, the angels that you saw at the giving of the Torah. You should never draw those. You shouldn't make any depiction of it. And also it talks about the cherubim, like the cherubs that were on top of the Holy Ark. You shouldn't make those depictions for yourself. Don't make them out of silver. I tell you to make them out of gold. Don't make extra ones out of gold. They're going to be considered idols. A lot of prohibitions here about imagery and statues and things like that, against creating depictions, physical depictions of these things. A lot of God, heavenly beings, and things like that. I mean, it's one line, but we could see that this is a recurring theme. Now, it actually ends off, very interesting, this Torah portion ends off with, God says, you should make for me an altar, and you're going to put it on the earth, right? And you're going to fill the inside with earth. And on it, you're going to offer sacrifices, the Olah, Shlamim, all the different sacrifices will be altered. And B'chol Makom Asher Asker Shmi Avodacha V'Rachticha, and every place that, they could mention, you can remember my name, I will come and bless you. And it says very specifically, you're going to make, when the altar is made out of stones, no iron should come to it. Don't raise a sword over it, or you're going to profane it, right? The altar is something which extends life, because you're coming closer to me, and all this sort of stuff. It's a place, for repentance and things like that. So it's not a place for a sword, which shortens life. And very interesting is that it says that you shouldn't have any steps on the altar. Instead, they had to build a ramp to go up the altar, right? Because he said it's immodest when you're striding up, right? It's almost like, because skirts could lift up, even though we know that the priests in the temple, they wore pants under their tunic, but it's still the general impression that's giving of walking up steps, and that the tunics can get raised up. It's an immodest thing, and part of it is that God's saying that this is a respect that you should show to my altar, which extends life and what it does. And the lesson that we take from that is, if God is going out of his way to tell us, no steps, build a ramp for an altar which is made of stone, of course, and how much more so, much we have this sort of respect and consideration for people who are made in God's image, for other people. And this is where the Parsha ends. So this wraps up the portion of the giving of the Torah. And actually the next portion gets into a lot of the laws that are actually part of the 613